The moment a powerful man abandons control is the moment you should start asking why. I did not remember falling. I did not remember how I ended up there. The last thing I remembered was rushing through the crowded lobby of the Moretti Grand Hotel while clutching a sealed envelope so tightly that my fingers hurt. After that, everything became fragments. Bright lights. Voices. Marble floors. Then darkness. When I finally became aware of my surroundings again, the first thing I noticed was silence. Not complete silence. The kind of silence that exists when dozens of people are trying very hard not to make noise. My eyes opened slowly. A crystal chandelier hung above me. Soft golden light reflected across the ceiling. For several seconds I simply stared upward, trying to understand where I was. Then I heard a man's voice. Calm. Deep. Controlled. She is awake. The room shifted around me. Someone offered water. Another person adjusted a blanket around my shoulders. Confusion settled over me immediately. I pushed myself upright and looked around. The hotel conference hall was almost empty now. Security personnel stood near every entrance. Hotel managers whispered nervously in corners. Nobody seemed relaxed. Nobody seemed normal. And standing a few feet away was Dominic Moretti. Even if I had never seen his face in magazines, I would have known he was the person in charge. Some people carried authority naturally. He carried it without effort. His dark suit looked flawless despite the obvious disruption around him. His expression remained unreadable. Yet his eyes never left me. "Can you tell me your name?" he asked. My throat felt dry. "Hannah Brooks." He nodded once. "Good." I frowned. "What happened?" Nobody answered immediately. Dominic glanced toward one of his security advisors before looking back at me. "That is what I am trying to find out." The answer made no sense. I looked around again. Every exit door in the conference center was closed. Security staff stood beside each one. Several frustrated guests were speaking with hotel employees near the hallway. Something was very wrong. "Why are the doors locked?" I asked quietly. Dominic held my gaze. "Because you were found here unconscious." My stomach tightened. "That does not explain this." He was silent for a moment. Then he stepped closer. "You arrived carrying something important." My pulse immediately quickened. The envelope. I looked down at my hands. Empty. My heart dropped. "Where is it?" Dominic noticed the change in my expression. "So you do remember it?" I stood too quickly. The room tilted for a second before stabilizing. "Where is the envelope?" Every person nearby seemed to become even more alert. Dominic's eyes narrowed slightly. Not suspicious. Interested. As if he had finally found the question he had been waiting for. "That," he said quietly, "is exactly why nobody is leaving this hotel." The words sent a chill through me. Suddenly the locked exits made sense. The nervous employees. The security teams. The tension hanging over the room. Someone had taken the envelope. And Dominic Moretti had apparently decided that until he found out who, the entire hotel was staying exactly where it was. Then one of his security officers rushed into the hall carrying a tablet. His face had gone pale. "Sir," he said. "You need to see this." Dominic took the device and studied the screen. For the first time, something changed in his expression. Real surprise. Slowly he looked back at me. "Hannah," he said. "According to the security footage, you were not alone when you arrived." I stared at Dominic, trying to process what he had just said. Not alone. The words echoed through my mind while the conference hall seemed to shrink around me. I searched my memory desperately. The hotel entrance. The revolving doors. The crowded lobby. The envelope in my hand. After that, everything dissolved into fragments. Faces blurred together. Voices faded into noise. I shook my head slowly. I do not remember anyone. Dominic studied me for a moment. He did not look disappointed. He looked concerned. As if he had expected that answer. The security officer stepped forward and handed him the tablet. Dominic looked at the screen once more before turning it toward me. Maybe this will help. My heart pounded as I accepted the device. Security footage filled the display. The timestamp showed less than an hour earlier. There I was, entering the hotel through the main lobby doors. The image was clear enough to recognize every detail. My coat. My purse. The envelope clutched against my chest. Then my stomach tightened. Someone was walking beside me. A woman. Approximately my age. Dark hair pulled into a simple ponytail. Gray jacket. Nothing remarkable about her appearance. Yet I knew immediately that I had never seen her before. Who is she? I whispered. Dominic folded his arms. That is what we are trying to determine. I watched the footage again. The woman remained beside me for nearly 30 seconds. She appeared to be speaking. I appeared to be listening. Then we disappeared together toward the conference wing. The video ended. Confusion settled over me like a heavy blanket. I do not know her. Dominic nodded. We already checked hotel records. And? She is not registered as a guest. A chill moved through me. Several feet away, security staff continued reviewing camera feeds while hotel managers nervously fielded complaints from guests who wanted to leave. Yet Dominic remained completely focused on me. Not the hotel. Not the inconvenience. Me. It made no sense. Why are you helping me? The question escaped before I could stop it. For the first time, his expression softened. Because someone brought you here for a reason. I frowned. That does not explain why you locked down an entire hotel. A faint smile touched the corner of his mouth. No. It does not. Before I could push further, another officer approached quickly. This time his urgency was impossible to miss. Sir, we recovered additional footage. Dominic immediately stood. Show me. The officer connected the tablet to a nearby monitor. Everyone in the room turned toward the screen. New footage appeared. A service corridor near the conference center. The timestamp was only minutes after I entered the building. The unknown woman was visible again. She was walking alone now. Fast. Purposeful. Then she stopped suddenly and looked directly toward the camera. Every conversation in the room died instantly. Because she was holding the envelope. My envelope. Dominic's jaw tightened. Pause it. The image froze. The woman stared straight into the lens. Calm. Almost deliberate. As though she knew someone would eventually watch this recording. Then the officer advanced the footage. The woman turned a corner and disappeared from view. The next camera should have captured her entering the adjacent hallway. It never did. She simply vanished. No exit. No elevator. No stairwell. Nothing. The room became silent again. One of the security analysts shook his head. We checked every angle twice. Dominic narrowed his eyes. And? She never appears again. My pulse quickened. That was impossible. Hotels did not swallow people. Cameras did not lose someone completely. Yet the footage was undeniable. Dominic stared at the frozen image for several long seconds. Then he looked toward me. Hannah. His voice dropped lower. More serious. There is something else you need to know. My stomach tightened instantly. What? He held my gaze. The woman in the video used her name before she disappeared. The words hit me harder than I expected. The woman knew my name. Not guessed it. Not overheard it. She knew it. I stared at Dominic while my mind raced through every possibility I could imagine. Coworker. Client. Former friend. Someone from a past event. Nothing fit. The woman on the screen was a complete stranger. Yet somehow she had approached me inside one of the most expensive hotels in New York, taken possession of the envelope I was carrying, disappeared from every camera, and used my name before vanishing. What exactly did she say? I asked. Dominic glanced toward the security analyst. The analyst pulled up a report on his tablet. The camera did not record audio clearly, he explained. But our enhancement team isolated a few words. My pulse quickened. And? He hesitated. She appeared to say, "Tell Hannah the promise still matters." Silence filled the room. I felt my stomach drop. Promise. The word sounded familiar. Not because I remembered the woman. Because I remembered hearing the phrase before. Somewhere. Long ago. Dominic noticed the change in my expression immediately. You recognize it. I rubbed my forehead. Maybe. The memory remained frustratingly out of reach. Like a song playing behind a closed door. Close enough to hear. Impossible to identify. Dominic motioned toward a private conference room connected to the hall. Come with me. Minutes later we sat alone inside a quiet office overlooking the city. The chaos outside faded behind thick glass walls. For the first time since waking up, I felt something close to calm. Dominic placed a bottle of water in front of me. Start from the beginning. I frowned. Beginning of what? The envelope. I looked down at my hands. Empty hands. I received it 3 days ago. From who? I do not know. His eyes narrowed slightly. I continued. There was no return address. No sender. Just my name. Dominic remained silent, encouraging me to continue. Inside was a note. What did it say? I swallowed. Deliver the enclosed documents to the Moretti Grand Hotel Conference Center today at 2 o'clock. Give them only to the person who asks about the promise. The room became completely still. Dominic leaned back slowly. The promise. I nodded. At the time it sounded ridiculous. Did you open the documents? No. His expression softened slightly. Most people would have. I almost did. I stared toward the skyline beyond the glass. But something told me not to. Dominic stood and walked toward the window. The afternoon sun reflected across the buildings outside. For several moments neither of us spoke. Then another knock interrupted the silence. One of his security officers entered carrying a thin file. We found something. Dominic accepted the folder. His eyes scanned the contents. Whatever he saw erased every trace of calm from his face. What is it? I asked. He looked directly at me. The woman from the footage. My heart immediately began pounding. Did you identify her? Dominic nodded once. Yes. Who is she? He placed the file on the table and turned the first page toward me. A photograph stared back from the report. The same woman. Same gray jacket. Same calm expression. Beneath the photograph was a name. My breath caught instantly. Because I recognized it. Not from the hotel. Not from the footage. From a framed photograph that used to sit in my grandmother's living room. Dominic's voice became very quiet. Hannah, according to this report, the woman disappeared 11 years ago. The room suddenly felt colder. I stared at the photograph on the table and felt every thought inside my head collide at once. 11 years ago. The woman in the security footage had supposedly disappeared 11 years ago. Yet I had stood beside her less than 2 hours earlier. I had walked through the hotel with her. I had listened to her speak. The footage proved it. That is impossible, I whispered. Dominic did not argue. He simply sat across from me, studying my reaction. The file remained open between us. Beneath the photograph were pages of reports, articles, and archived records. The woman's name was Claire Whitmore. I knew that name. Not well. Not clearly. But enough to recognize it instantly. My grandmother used to keep a framed picture on a bookshelf near her living room window. Every summer when I visited, I would ask who the smiling woman beside her was. My grandmother always gave the same answer. An old friend. Then she would change the subject. I picked up the photograph from the file. The image was younger than the woman from the hotel footage, but it was undeniably the same person. She knew my grandmother. Dominic leaned forward slightly. Tell me everything you remember. I closed my eyes and searched through years of forgotten memories. Family dinners. Holiday visits. Old photographs. Then something surfaced. Small. Almost insignificant. The promise. Dominic immediately focused on me. What about it? I opened my eyes. My grandmother used that word. His expression sharpened. When? Every birthday. The memory became clearer with every second. My grandmother would hug me tightly and repeat the same sentence. One day you will understand why promises matter. As a child, I thought it was simply one of her favorite sayings. Now I was no longer sure. Dominic stood and walked toward the windows overlooking Manhattan. Evening had begun settling over the city. Lights flickered on across the skyline. The hotel remained partially locked down below us. Security teams continued searching. Staff members continued reviewing footage. Yet the mystery seemed to be growing instead of shrinking. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. One of Dominic's senior advisors entered carrying another folder. We found something in the conference center. Dominic turned immediately. What? The advisor handed him a sealed evidence bag. Inside was a small silver key. Nothing remarkable about it at first glance. No markings. No label. Just a simple key attached to a faded blue ribbon. My breath caught instantly. Dominic noticed. You recognize it? I nodded slowly. The ribbon. He waited. My grandmother used ribbons like that. The advisor looked surprised. The key was hidden beneath one of the conference tables. Dominic removed the bag and examined it carefully. Then he noticed something engraved along the edge of the metal. Tiny letters. Almost invisible. He handed it to me. My pulse quickened as I read them. Brookhaven Station. Locker 214. I stared at the engraving. Brookhaven Station was nearly 40 miles outside Manhattan. An old train station that had mostly fallen out of use years ago. Dominic's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Does that mean anything to you? I shook my head. No. Yet even as I answered, something deep inside me felt uncertain. As if another forgotten memory was trying to surface. Before anyone could speak again, Dominic's phone vibrated. He answered immediately. The conversation lasted less than 30 seconds. When it ended, his expression had changed completely. What happened? I asked. He lowered the phone slowly. The security team just reviewed the final camera angle from the hotel entrance. My stomach tightened. And? Dominic looked directly at me. The woman did not arrive with you. Silence filled the room. Then he added the sentence that changed everything. According to the footage, she was already inside the hotel waiting for you. I could not stop thinking about that detail. Claire had been waiting for me. Not following me. Not accidentally crossing paths with me. Waiting. The distinction changed everything. It meant the hotel was not a random meeting place. It was the destination. The place she intended me to reach. The place where she intended the envelope to arrive. I sat quietly in Dominic's private office while the city lights brightened beyond the windows. Every answer seemed to create two new questions. The silver key rested on the table between us. Brookhaven Station. Locker 214. Dominic remained unusually silent. He was studying patterns. Connecting pieces. I could almost see it happening behind his eyes. Finally he looked up. "We are going to Brookhaven." I blinked. "Tonight?" "Tonight." There was no hesitation in his voice. No uncertainty. Just a decision. 45 minutes later we were driving through the outskirts of New York. The city gradually disappeared behind us, replaced by quiet roads and dark fields. Rain threatened again but never fully arrived. I sat in the passenger seat of a black SUV while Dominic drove. No security convoy. No unnecessary attention. Just the two of us. The silence was surprisingly comfortable. For the first time all day, my thoughts slowed enough to notice something strange. I felt safe. Not because the mystery had been solved. Because I was no longer carrying it alone. Dominic glanced toward me briefly. "You should try to rest." I laughed softly. "I do not think that is possible anymore." To my surprise, he almost smiled. "Fair point." An hour later we arrived at Brookhaven Station. The place looked frozen in time. The old brick building stood beneath dim yellow lights. Most of the platforms were abandoned. Only a handful of travelers moved through the station. The air smelled faintly of rain and old concrete. Locker 214 sat near the far end of a quiet hallway. My pulse quickened as we approached. The key fit perfectly. For a second neither of us moved. Then I opened the door. Inside was a single leather folder. Nothing else. No note. No explanation. Just the folder. Dominic carefully removed it and carried it to a nearby bench. Together we opened it. The first pages contained financial reports. Then legal documents. Then photographs. Lots of photographs. Community centers. Schools. Children's programs. Scholarship events. Everything appeared connected to the same charitable foundation. I frowned. What am I looking at? Dominic turned another page. His expression changed immediately. This is not a random foundation. He handed me a document. My breath caught. At the top was a familiar name. Whitmore Children's Trust. Claire Whitmore's Family Foundation. The same organization my grandmother used to mention occasionally when discussing charity work. Page after page revealed records spanning decades. Donations. Grants. Educational programs. Nothing suspicious. Nothing dramatic. Yet Claire had hidden these documents inside an abandoned train station locker. Which meant they mattered. Then a folded letter slipped from the back of the folder. My name was written across the front. Hannah Brooks. My hands immediately began shaking. Dominic noticed. "You want me to read it?" I shook my head. "No." Slowly I unfolded the paper. The handwriting was elegant and familiar. Not Claire's. My grandmother's. My throat tightened instantly. The first sentence stole the air from my lungs. "Hannah, if you are reading this, then Claire succeeded. She found you before they did." I looked up in shock. Dominic was already watching me. Then I continued reading. And with every line, I realized the envelope everyone had been chasing was never the important thing. I was. My hands shook so badly that I had to stop reading twice. The old train station faded around me while the words on the page became the only thing that mattered. Dominic sat beside me on the bench, saying nothing. Waiting. Giving me space. The same way he had from the beginning. I took a breath and continued. "Hannah, if Claire reached you, then events have already started moving faster than we hoped. There are things about your family that we chose not to tell you until the right time. Not because we wanted to hide the truth. Because we wanted you to have a normal life first. My throat tightened. The letter continued for several pages. My grandmother explained that the Whitmore Children's Trust and another charitable organization had worked together for decades. They funded scholarships, youth centers, and educational programs across several states. Thousands of children benefited from their work every year. Most people never knew the names behind it. That had always been intentional. Then I reached the part that changed everything. My grandmother explained that years earlier, a group of powerful investors attempted to gain influence over the charitable network. Not to destroy it. Not to steal from it. They simply wanted control. Visibility. Recognition. They viewed philanthropy as a business opportunity instead of a responsibility. The boards refused. The partnerships remained independent. The conflict never became public, but it never completely disappeared either. I lowered the page. This is about a foundation. Dominic nodded slowly. That is what it looks like. I continued reading. Claire had apparently agreed to watch over certain records connected to the organizations. My grandmother did the same. Together they protected documents proving the original charitable mission could never be altered without unanimous approval from specific families. Families like mine. I stared at the final paragraph. For years, Hannah, we hoped the issue would fade away. Instead, people continued searching for ways around the protections. That is why Claire promised me she would find you when the time came. I folded the letter carefully. The station felt strangely quiet. Outside, a train passed somewhere in the distance. The sound echoed briefly before fading into the night. Dominic remained thoughtful. So the envelope was carrying information connected to the foundations. I nodded. But that still does not explain why everyone suddenly cares now. Before he could answer, his phone vibrated. He checked the screen and frowned. That expression alone was enough to tighten my stomach. What is it? Dominic stood immediately. We need to go. Why? He slipped the phone into his pocket. Because somebody just accessed records connected to your grandmother's trust less than 20 minutes ago. My pulse quickened. How is that possible? That is exactly what I intend to find out. An hour later we were back in Manhattan. The city glowed beneath the night sky while traffic reflected across rain-dark streets. Instead of returning to the conference center, Dominic brought me to a private office inside the upper floors of the hotel. Security teams were already waiting. Multiple monitors displayed financial records, archived documents, and activity logs. One analyst looked up as we entered. We found the access point. Dominic approached immediately. Where? The analyst enlarged a file on the screen. The request originated from a secure archive account. I frowned. What does that mean? Nobody answered immediately. Dominic's eyes narrowed as he read the information. Then he slowly turned toward me. For the first time all evening, he looked genuinely surprised. The account belongs to Claire Whitmore. Silence filled the room. I stared at him. That is impossible. Dominic nodded once. Maybe. He looked back at the monitor. Except the system shows the account was used 3 hours ago. For several seconds nobody in the room spoke. The glow from the monitors reflected across the glass walls while the city stretched endlessly beyond them. I stared at the screen displaying Claire Whitmore's account information. 3 hours ago. The numbers remained unchanged no matter how many times I looked at them. 3 hours ago. Not 11 years ago. Not archived data. Not a historical record. Recent activity. Dominic rested both hands on the conference table and studied the report. Unlike everyone else, he did not seem interested in impossible explanations. He was looking for facts. Patterns. Connections. Show me every action tied to the account, he said quietly. The analyst nodded and expanded a timeline. Several entries appeared on the screen. Most were routine archive reviews. Then one line caught everyone's attention. A document had been accessed and downloaded less than 30 minutes before I arrived at the hotel. Dominic pointed toward it. Open that file. The analyst clicked immediately. A scanned document appeared. At first it looked ordinary. Legal language. Foundation records. Signatures. Then I noticed a highlighted section near the bottom. My name. Hannah Brooks. My heart skipped. Why am I in there? Dominic remained focused on the screen. The analyst continued reading. The document names Hannah Brooks as a future voting trustee connected to the Whitmore Educational Alliance. Silence settled over the room. I stared at the words. Voting trustee. The title meant nothing to me. Yet judging by the reactions around me, it clearly mattered. Dominic finally sat down across from me. Your grandmother was protecting more than family history. I frowned. What does that mean? He folded his hands together. It means that when certain decisions are made about the charitable network, your approval may eventually be required. The realization landed slowly. The foundations. The letters. Claire. The envelope. Everything suddenly pointed toward the same thing. Not money. Not fame. Responsibility. I looked down at the old letter still resting beside me. I am a project coordinator, I said quietly. I organize fundraising events and community programs. I am not qualified for any of this. Dominic's expression softened. According to your grandmother, you are. The answer should have felt overwhelming. Instead, it felt strangely comforting. For the first time since waking up on the conference center floor, the pieces were beginning to fit together. Then another notification appeared on one of the monitors. The analyst froze. Sir. Dominic immediately stood. What now? The analyst pointed toward the screen. A secure message had just arrived through the same archive system. No sender information. No return address. Only a short text message. My pulse quickened as the analyst opened it. The room became completely silent. One sentence appeared across the display. She is ready now. Dominic read it twice. Then a second attachment automatically downloaded beneath the message. A video file. Nobody moved. Slowly the analyst opened it. The screen flickered. A woman appeared. Older than the photograph in the file but unmistakably the same person. Claire Whitmore. Alive. My breath caught instantly. She looked directly into the camera as if she had been waiting years for this moment. Then she smiled gently and spoke the first words. Hannah, if you are watching this, then Dominic Moretti kept his promise. The room disappeared around me. The monitors. The analysts. The city lights beyond the glass. None of it mattered anymore. Claire Whitmore was alive. Or at least she had been alive when the video was recorded. I stared at the screen while my pulse hammered in my ears. Beside me, Dominic remained completely still. Yet something in his expression had changed. Recognition. Not surprise. Recognition. Claire smiled gently from the video and adjusted her position in the chair. Behind her was a simple office lined with bookshelves. Nothing extravagant. Nothing dramatic. Just a quiet room. If you are seeing this, she continued, then it means events unfolded exactly as we expected. Her eyes shifted slightly toward the camera. And it means Dominic chose to stay. The room remained silent. I glanced toward him. He was watching the screen with an intensity one had not seen before. Claire smiled again. I know you probably have questions. Most of them cannot be answered in a single message. But there is one thing you need to understand immediately. She paused. Nobody was ever trying to find the documents. I felt my stomach tighten. Claire continued. The documents can be copied, archived, protected, recreated. They were never the objective. The words echoed through my mind. Exactly what my grandmother's letter had suggested. Claire folded her hands together. The objective was always the person capable of protecting what the documents represent. My throat tightened. You, Hannah. Nobody in the room moved. Claire's voice remained calm. Steady. Certain. For years, your grandmother and I hoped you would never need to become involved. We wanted you to build your own life. We wanted you to be free. She smiled sadly. Unfortunately, responsibility has a way of finding people. Dominic looked away briefly. Almost as though he already knew where this was heading. Then Claire said something that made my heart stop. There is one final truth Dominic has not told you. I immediately turned toward him. His jaw tightened slightly. Claire continued before he could react. Many years ago, after your parents passed away, your grandmother asked 3 people to help protect her future. The room became completely silent. I was one of them. She paused. Dominic Moretti was another. I stared at him in shock. He never looked away. Claire nodded gently. He was much younger then. Far from the man he would become. But your grandmother trusted him. My mind struggled to process the revelation. Dominic had known about me for years. Not every detail. Not my daily life. But enough. Enough to recognize my name. Enough to lock down an entire hotel when something felt wrong. Claire's expression softened. He promised your grandmother that if the day ever came, he would help you find the truth. My eyes filled with emotion. Everything suddenly made sense. The way he had reacted. The way he never questioned whether I deserved help. The way he remained beside me through every answer and every fear. Claire glanced down briefly before returning her gaze to the camera. The final records are stored where only one person can authorize their release. My pulse quickened. You. She smiled. Tomorrow morning, you will receive an invitation. Accept it. Then her expression became serious. And Hannah, when the invitation arrives, remember one thing. The person you trust most has already spent years keeping a promise you never knew existed. The video ended. Darkness filled the screen. Nobody spoke. Slowly I turned toward Dominic. He met my gaze calmly. Then his phone vibrated. One new message appeared. The invitation Claire promised had just arrived. The invitation arrived at exactly 9 o'clock the next morning. No sender. No explanation. Just a location, a time, and a digital authorization code linked to my name. After everything that had happened, I should have felt nervous. Instead, I felt calm. For the first time since waking up on the conference center floor, I understood that the story was no longer about confusion. It was about responsibility. Dominic drove us to the location himself. The address led to a historic foundation building overlooking the Hudson River. From the outside it looked ordinary. Inside, it felt like stepping into decades of history. Photographs lined the walls. Scholarship recipients. Community centers. Libraries. Youth programs. Lives changed through quiet acts of generosity. A receptionist greeted us immediately. Miss Brooks, they have been waiting for you. The words sent a strange feeling through me. Not fear. Recognition. As though I had unknowingly been walking toward this moment for years. We entered a private boardroom where several trustees were already seated. Most appeared older than me. Experienced. Accomplished. Yet every person stood when I entered. One of them slid a folder across the table. Your grandmother left detailed instructions. I opened it carefully. Inside were letters, legal directives, and handwritten notes. Every document pointed toward the same conclusion. The charitable alliance would remain independent. Its mission would remain unchanged. Educational opportunities would continue expanding. Community programs would continue serving families. Everything my grandmother and Claire had protected would survive. My eyes filled with tears as I reached the final page. At the bottom was a short handwritten message. Hannah, success is not measured by what you keep. It is measured by what you give away. Love, Grandma. For several seconds I could not speak. Then I signed the authorization documents. The decision felt less like accepting power and more like accepting purpose. The room erupted into warm applause. Not because of me. Because a promise had finally reached its destination. Later that afternoon, another message arrived. This one included an address outside the city. Dominic and I drove there together. A small lakeside cottage stood beneath tall oak trees. Waiting on the porch was Claire Whitmore. Alive. Real. Not a photograph. Not a video recording. A woman who had spent years honoring a promise made to my grandmother. The moment I stepped onto the porch, she smiled. You made it. I laughed through tears and hugged her. No explanations were necessary. No dramatic speeches. Just relief. Claire spent hours answering questions. Filling in missing pieces. Sharing stories about my parents, my grandmother, and the charitable work they believed in. By sunset, the mystery that had followed me for days had finally become a complete picture. As we prepared to leave, Claire looked toward Dominic. You kept your word. He simply nodded. The exchange lasted only seconds, but it carried years of history. Driving back toward Manhattan, I watched the city lights appear along the horizon. Everything felt different now. Not because my life had changed overnight. Because I finally understood it. Dominic glanced toward me. Any regrets? I smiled and looked out the window. Only one. What is that? I laughed softly. That it took a locked hotel, a missing envelope, and 100 unanswered questions to get here. For the first time, he smiled without restraint. The skyline reflected across the glass as we drove home. The crisis was over. The promises had been honored. The future remained unwritten. And I realized something my grandmother had known all along. Sometimes the people who protect your life are not the ones who stand in front of you. They are the ones who quietly keep their promises until you are ready to stand on your own.